Have you ever asked yourself why you're so tired? Even when nothing is happening, you wake up, you sit at your desk, you go through the motions. No chaos, no emergencies, no visible stress. And yet, something inside you feels worn out, heavy, restless. What if I told you it's not your job that's draining you? It's not your responsibilities. It's not even the people around you. It's your mind. More specifically, your mind's silent obsession with control. The need to predict, the urge to plan, the fear of not knowing. We try to hold life still, as if peace could be forced into place. But it never works. And there was one man who understood this, centuries before we gave it a name. Michel de Montaigne, a philosopher who didn't pretend to have the answers. He simply said, "I don't know." And that's okay. A radical idea, even more radical today. And if that line touches something deep in you, if you're tired of pretending to have it all figured out, subscribe now. You won't want to miss what comes next. But before we can embrace the unknown, we need to understand why we fear it so much. From the moment we're born, we're taught to chase answers. What do you want to be when you grow up? Where are you headed in life? What's your 5-year plan? We learn that uncertainty is dangerous, that questions without answers make us weak, that I don't know is something to hide, not to say out loud. And the world we live in now only magnifies that fear. We carry devices in our pockets that give us answers in milliseconds. Google it. Ask ChatGPT. Search. Solve. Control. We've trained our minds to expect clarity. On demand. No wonder we panic when things get cloudy. No wonder we freeze when the path isn't clear. We've become allergic to not knowing. Think about it. We treat ambiguity like a virus. We rush to fix it, fill it, bury it under productivity, hacks, and digital noise. We can't sit in silence. We can't sit with a question. We feel naked when we don't have a conclusion. And the irony is, the more we need certainty, the less prepared we are for real life. Because life is uncertain by nature. It moves. It shifts. It breaks the rules we tried to write. But we're so used to performing certainty that we begin to perform it even to ourselves. We fake answers to feel in control. We lie to ourselves just to avoid the truth, that we don't actually know what's going to happen, that we don't actually have it all together, and that maybe that's okay. Michel de Montaigne saw this clearly. Centuries before smartphones, centuries before social media, he watched people chase certainty and slowly lose themselves in the process. He decided to do something radical. He stopped pretending. He said the most dangerous phrase in philosophy and in life, "I don't know." Not as an excuse, not as a defense, but as a form of liberation. Because when you admit you don't know, you stop performing. You start listening. You create space for growth, for honesty, for freedom. See, modern culture tells us knowledge is power. And it is, sometimes. But the relentless pursuit of knowing everything, that's not power. That's fear in disguise. That's the voice in your head saying, if I don't have the answer, I'll lose control. If I don't have the answer, I'll fall behind. If I don't have the answer, I'll be exposed. So we overcompensate. We overwork. We overthink. We stay up late, Googling symptoms. We write 5 versions of our resume. We plan the next 3 years in color-coded calendars, just to avoid sitting in the discomfort of not knowing what comes next. But Montaigne flips the script. He invites us into something deeper. What if not knowing isn't the enemy? What if not knowing is the door to actual peace? Think about it. If you didn't need to have all the answers, wouldn't your mind feel lighter? Wouldn't your relationships feel more honest? Wouldn't your decisions come from presence instead of panic? Maybe freedom doesn't come from certainty. Maybe freedom comes from the courage to say, I don't know, and I'm okay with that. Let's pause here. Let's breathe into that space. And now, ask yourself, honestly, what are you currently pretending to know, just so you don't have to face the unknown? Because the moment you drop the performance, you gain access to something real, something most people never find. Something Montaigne found, not in answers, but in doubt. He didn't run from it. He lived inside it. He let it shape his thoughts. He let it challenge his ego. And it made him wise. Not because he figured everything out, but because he stopped needing to. Now the question becomes, how did Montaigne live this way? How did he build a life around uncertainty and not collapse under it? That's what we'll explore next. Michel de Montaigne did something rare. He didn't try to build a system. He didn't try to start a movement. He didn't try to tell you how to live. He simply paid attention to himself, to his doubts, to his contradictions. While other philosophers built grand theories, Montaigne built a mirror, not to admire himself, but to observe himself without illusion. He called his writings essay, not essays as we know them now, but attempts, experiments, ongoing thoughts, not final truths. He didn't pretend to be wise. He didn't pose as a master. He was a man, sitting with his own mind. And the question that guided his entire body of work, just 3 words, what do I know? It sounds simple, but it's one of the most radical questions you can ask. Because in that question, you're not claiming truth. You're confronting pretense. You're not rejecting knowledge. You're rejecting performance. You're not tearing down wisdom. You're tearing down ego. See, Montaigne wasn't against knowing. He was against pretending to know. He didn't attack reason. He attacked the illusion of certainty. And in that space, he found something most people miss: clarity without rigidity, insight without arrogance, humility without helplessness. Now let's fast forward to our modern lives. We live in a world of constant projection. We show, we perform, we broadcast our identities like digital billboards. Social media trains us to appear certain, to have strong opinions, to be experts in everything. We live stream our thoughts before we even have time to understand them. We share conclusions before we've asked real questions. We brand ourselves, curate ourselves, publish ourselves. And in the middle of all that noise, Montaigne feels like a whisper, a quiet, thoughtful man, alone in his study, writing not to impress the world, but to meet himself. He didn't live stream his life. He lived it slowly and inwardly. He asked hard questions, like, what am I really feeling? What part of me is still afraid? Am I chasing wisdom or attention? Is this belief mine or borrowed? He didn't share those thoughts for approval. He wrote them down to find what was true. Because for Montaigne, truth wasn't a product. It wasn't a TED Talk. It wasn't content. It was a process. Messy. Wandering. Alive. And that's what made him different. He wasn't trying to convince you. He was trying to understand himself. He believed that when you observe yourself honestly, you get closer to something real, something quiet, something solid, even in uncertainty. And that's where his strength came from. Not from how much he knew, but from how deeply he questioned what he thought he knew. Let that sink in. Because in today's world, doubt is often seen as weakness. We want clarity. We want conviction. We want instant confidence. But Montaigne reminds us, doubt, when used wisely, is strength. It keeps us humble. It keeps us awake. It keeps us human. And maybe that's what we're missing. In an age of instant certainty, we've forgotten how to sit in sincere uncertainty. Montaigne didn't have all the answers, but he asked better questions. And in those questions, he found freedom. But in asking those questions, he also discovered something uncomfortable, a hard truth most of us try to avoid. The more we try to control life, the more anxious we become. And that's exactly where we're headed next. We all want control. It makes us feel safe, predictable, powerful. Control feels like clarity, like protection, like order in a chaotic world. So we plan, we organize, we manage every detail we can. We write out morning routines. We color-code calendars. We set goals for December. While it's still barely June, we check our phones again and again, just to make sure nothing has spun out of place. We refresh our inbox. We track every calorie. We count every step. And if we're honest, we're not doing it out of peace. We're doing it out of panic. Because deep down, we believe that if we don't hold on tight, everything will fall apart. But here's the truth Montaigne saw, a truth we spend most of our lives avoiding. The tighter you grip, the more anxious you become. Control doesn't calm the storm. It often creates it. The constant planning, the obsessive checking, the endless mental rehearsals, they don't bring peace. They bring pressure. You try to plan your way into safety, but end up scripting yourself into burnout. You try to manage every outcome, but forget how to live inside uncertainty. You try to control how people see you, but lose sight of who you really are. And still, things go wrong. Plan collapse. People disappoint. Life changes direction without asking your permission. So what then? What do you do when your perfectly built control tower starts to shake? For Montaigne, the answer wasn't to build a stronger tower. It was to step outside of it. He realized something most of us learn too late. Not being in control is not failure. It's the reality of being alive. The universe doesn't operate on our schedules. People don't follow our scripts. And no amount of spreadsheets or systems can stop life from happening. So rather than fight that, Montaigne did something radical. He surrendered. Not in a passive way. Not in a hopeless way. He surrendered his illusion, so he could live in what's real. And what's real is that life is unpredictable, messy, inconsistent, alive. When you stop trying to control it, you can actually start to participate in it. You notice more. You adapt better. You breathe deeper. Because the energy you used to spend forcing life now flows into facing it. That's where peace comes from. Not from knowing what's next, but from being okay not knowing. That's what Montaigne understood. And what most of us forget. Now, this doesn't mean you shouldn't plan, or that you shouldn't have goals. Structure has value. Discipline matters. But when control becomes your identity, you lose the ability to adjust. You become fragile, brittle, easily broken, like glass trying to stay still in a storm. True power isn't in holding tight. It's in holding lightly, loosely, open-handed. It's the strength to let go, when clinging only creates more chaos. It's the courage to say, I don't need to manage this moment. I need to meet it. That shift from management to presence changes everything. It doesn't make life easier, but it makes you steadier. And sometimes, that's the difference between surviving and suffering. So ask yourself, what are you trying to control right now? That's actually controlling you. What if the peace you're chasing comes not from holding tighter, but from letting go? If this resonates with you, if you feel like you're caught in that control trap too, hit that subscribe button. We're building something different here. A space where we don't run from the unknown, but learn to live inside it together. So if we can't control everything, what can we do? We can begin with something powerful, something rare, radical self-honesty. And that's where we go next. There's a kind of strength that no one talks about. It doesn't look like power. It doesn't sound like confidence. It doesn't win arguments or dominate rooms. But it changes everything. It's called radical self-honesty. Montaigne practiced it long before the term existed. He didn't guard his mind with layers of armor. He didn't protect himself from uncomfortable truths. He opened the door wide and sat with whatever walked in. He called it examining himself without defense. No excuses, no image management. Just a clear, unfiltered mirror. Most people avoid that kind of reflection because it's not pretty. It's not curated. It doesn't fit neatly into a motivational quote, but it's real. And in a world full of noise, real is rare. Montaigne didn't try to fix himself. He tried to see himself. Not the version he wanted to be. Not the version others expected. The actual version flaws, fears, contradictions and all. And that takes courage. Because facing yourself without filters, without justifications, without the need to explain, is terrifying at first. But over time, it becomes freedom. Because the more honest you are with yourself, the less the world can manipulate you. The less shame sticks. The less criticism stings. The less performance controls you. You stop chasing validation. You stop living for applause. You start living from truth. But here's the catch. Honesty is not the same as self-criticism. This isn't about beating yourself up. It's not about spiraling into guilt or shame. It's about clarity. It's about seeing what's actually there, instead of what you wish were true. Now let's talk about something important. Most people think they're self-aware, but what they're actually doing is self-monitoring. Here's the difference. Self-awareness is freedom. It says, "This is what I'm feeling. Let me understand it." Self-monitoring is a prison. It says, "This is what I'm feeling. Let me hide it. Let me correct it. Let me make sure it looks acceptable." One invites curiosity. The other demands control. One connects you to your inner life. The other disconnects you and calls it discipline. Montaigne chose awareness over performance. And we can too. It starts small. You don't need a therapist. You don't need a dramatic retreat. You need a notebook, a quiet space, and one simple question: what am I lying to myself about today? It could be something small. A resentment you're pretending doesn't exist. A goal you no longer care about. A relationship you're forcing because you're afraid of being alone. Or maybe it's a feeling, an anxiety you keep numbing. A sadness you keep masking with busyness. Write it down. Not for anyone else. Not to solve it right away. Just to see it. To bring it into the light. To stop hiding from yourself. Another powerful question: where is this emotion coming from? Is your anger really about what just happened, or is it old pain being triggered again? Is your fear based on truth, or just a story your brain has told too many times? Ask. Listen. Don't edit. When you get honest with yourself, you stop living in reaction. You start responding from a deeper place. You make decisions from clarity, not confusion. You move through life with alignment, not anxiety. And yes, it's uncomfortable at first. It can feel raw. It can feel like pulling the rug out from under your own ego. But that's the work. That's the path to real strength. Not strength that looks good. Strength that holds. When everything around you starts to fall apart. Montaigne didn't just think. He watched himself think. He noticed his contradictions. He questioned his certainties. He named what was happening inside him in real time. That's not weakness. That's mastery. Because the person who can sit with their inner chaos without needing to control it, without running from it, is the person who becomes unshakable. And that kind of inner steadiness, it doesn't come from outside praise. It comes from radical honesty, practiced daily. Try it. Start today. One sentence. One page. One honest look in the mirror. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to be willing to see yourself clearly. And when you start seeing yourself clearly, you'll run into something deeper. The real pain isn't honesty. It's what honesty reveals. Change. And that's where we're headed next. We say we're afraid of change, but that's not quite true. What we're really afraid of is losing the version of ourselves we've come to depend on. The version we've spent years building, curating, protecting. That identity wrapped in labels, achievements, and routines feels like home. And change threatens to burn it down. That's why it hurts. Not because of the change itself, but because of what it takes from us. Or rather, what it reveals we were never really holding. We build identities like scaffolding. We wrap ourselves in roles. I'm a doctor. I'm a partner. I'm the strong one. I'm the smart one. I'm the one who always has it together. And then something shifts. We lose the job. The relationship ends. The story no longer fits. And suddenly, we don't know who we are anymore. It's disorienting. It's terrifying. Because It feels like we are crumbling. But what's actually crumbling is the illusion. The illusion that you were ever one fixed thing. The illusion that you could define your essence by titles or timelines. And that's where the pain really lives. Not in the change, but in the shattering of the mask. Montaigne saw this clearly. He understood that the self is not a statue to preserve, but a river to observe. He once wrote, "To contradict myself is to evolve." In today's world, contradiction is often labeled as weakness. We fear being called inconsistent. We want to be seen as solid, reliable, unshakeable. But Montaigne flips that idea. He suggests that growth requires contradiction. Because if you never change your mind, if you never see things differently, if you never question who you were, how could you ever evolve? To grow is to outgrow. And to outgrow is to leave behind a version of yourself you once clung to. That's painful, but it's also sacred. Imagine a snake shedding its skin. It doesn't mean the old skin was wrong. It just no longer fits. And yet most of us fight to squeeze back into it. We return to old relationships, old patterns, old versions of ourselves, just to avoid the discomfort of expansion. But every time you do that, you delay your evolution. You sacrifice your becoming for the safety of your past. What if you didn't? What if you let change do its work? What if you allowed your identity to loosen? What if you could say, "I'm not who I was yesterday, and that's okay"? That kind of inner permission creates space. Space to breathe. Space to question. Space to rebuild, not on old definitions, but on deeper awareness. See, most people attach their worth to things that are fragile. A job title, a relationship status, the approval of others. When those things shift, they break. But you don't have to, because you're not those things. You're the awareness behind them. You're the soul that watches. You're the one who adapts. And that's the hidden gift of change. It strips away what you're not, to help you remember who you really are. Not a brand, not a role, not a perfect image, but a human being in motion, always unfolding, always revising, always rediscovering. The more you resist change, the more brittle you become. The more you allow it, the more resilient you become. Because flexibility is strength. Softness is power. Contradiction is growth. So if you're in a season of change right now, and it hurts, good. It means you're growing. It means something inside you is stretching. It means you're no longer fitting inside the mold you once lived in. And that's not failure. That's transformation. Honor the discomfort. Don't rush it. Let it shape you. Because on the other side of change is a version of you that doesn't have to perform anymore. A version that's truer, lighter, more real. But how do we move through change without collapsing? How do we train the mind to bend instead of break? That's where Montaigne's daily practices come in. And that's what we explore next. Mental agility isn't about thinking faster. It's about thinking wider, slower, deeper. It's not the ability to do more, it's the strength to pause, especially when your mind screams for control. Montaigne understood this better than most. He wasn't trying to hack his mindset. He was trying to understand it. to notice how quickly certainty turns into blindness, how easily confidence becomes arrogance, how silently fear can dress itself up as clarity. So he did something few people do. He trained himself to stop. Right at the moment when he felt most sure, because he knew when your convictions are too sharp, when your opinions feel too complete, that's when you're most likely to be protecting yourself from something uncomfortable. So he paused, not to overthink, but to listen. That was his strength, not the power to push forward, but the wisdom to step back. And in that pause he wrote, but not like we write today. Not to publish, not to perform, not to teach. He wrote to reveal, to confess, to sort the chaos swirling inside. It wasn't poetic. It wasn't polished. It was raw. And that was the point. Because there's something sacred about unedited honesty. It disarms the ego. It recenters the self. It gives your scattered thoughts somewhere to land and rest. Try it. Write just one page. Even half a page. Not what you should be feeling, but what's actually there. Don't aim to be wise. Aim to be real. Then, once the storm is on the page, let it go. This was Montaigne's rhythm. Observe. Write. Release. He knew that plans have value. But clinging to them too tightly is another form of fear. So he practiced holding life lightly. Not carelessly, but humbly. He made room for uncertainty. Not because he enjoyed chaos, but because he understood its place. Life does not follow bullet points. It unfolds. It surprises. It bends and shifts without warning. The more rigid you are, the more painful that becomes. But when you train your mind to move with it, something shifts. You're not thrown off by every detour. You don't collapse every time a plan falls apart. You adjust. You adapt. You breathe. And here's what made Montaigne different. He didn't just adapt with discipline, he adapted with humor. He laughed at himself. Genuinely. Frequently. Not with sarcasm, but with softness. Because once you realize how absurd the ego can be, how often it overreacts, how dramatically it protects its own image, you begin to smile. Not mockingly, but kindly. You see the performance and you step off the stage. That's not weakness. That's power. Because humor melts rigidity. It gives you the space to evolve, without shame. And finally, when the world became too loud, Montaigne withdrew into silence. Not to escape, but to recalibrate. He didn't fear being alone. He feared being consumed by voices, by noise, by the pressure to always know. So he sat with himself, in the quiet, where thoughts have room to breathe, where the soul has a chance to reorient. That silence wasn't emptiness. It was structure. It was discipline. It was sacred. And today, when our minds are constantly overstimulated, that kind of silence is not a luxury. It's a necessity. Not because you're weak, but because you're human. And your mind, like Montaigne's, needs space to realign. This is mental agility. It doesn't look impressive on paper. It won't get applause. It won't trend. But it will keep you alive, in the deepest way. It's the ability to bend instead of break, to laugh instead of resist, to release, instead of control. And when practiced daily, quietly, honestly, it becomes your armor. Not made of steel, but of flexibility. And that's the kind that actually lasts. And if you keep showing up like this, something surprising will happen. You'll begin to feel free. Not because you found all the answers, but because you no longer need them. And that is where we go next. What if everything you've been taught about peace is backwards? We're told that peace comes from clarity, from control, from figuring it all out. Have a 5-year plan. Know your purpose. Stick to your vision. Define yourself and never deviate. But what if true peace doesn't come from knowing everything? What if it comes from no longer needing to? Let that sink in. Because that one shift changes everything. You move from a life of pursuit to a life of presence. From trying to grasp every outcome to flowing with what actually is. And that's where the deepest kind of freedom lives, not in certainty, but in surrender. We've been raised to think that surrender means defeat, giving up, losing control. But Montaigne saw it differently. He understood that surrender to reality, to change, to the unknown is not weakness. It's wisdom. It's alignment. It's inner stillness in motion. He wrote it simply, powerfully, honestly. I don't know, and I no longer need to. Read that again. Say it out loud if you need to. Feel how that line lands differently than all the noise around you. It doesn't mean you stop learning. It doesn't mean you give up on growth. It means you stop gripping. You stop living as if your entire identity depends on having an answer for everything. Because it doesn't. You can still move forward with openness. You can still make choices without perfect clarity. You can still be powerful without being rigid. That's real transformation. That's spiritual maturity. That's mental freedom. The world wants you to panic when the path isn't clear, to reach for control, to hide behind strong opinions or busy schedules or shiny plans. But you don't have to play that game anymore. You can choose something quieter, something stronger, something deeper. You can choose to stand still right in the middle of the unknown and not flinch. You can choose to wake up in the morning, not with a script, but with a readiness to meet whatever comes. You can let go of the idea that you must be impressive in order to be enough. You can release the pressure to always have the right words and just let silence speak. You can be human, fully, imperfectly, honestly, and in doing that, you become something rare in this world. You become unshakable, not because nothing moves you, but because you've stopped resisting the movement. You've stopped performing certainty. You've started living with curiosity. That's the gift of embracing uncertainty. It doesn't remove life's chaos. It removes your need to be above it. And suddenly you don't feel exhausted anymore. Because you're no longer fighting the current. You're flowing with it. You're not running from not knowing. You're resting inside it. You're not chasing identity. You're revealing what was always there beneath the noise. The quiet voice. The steady one. The presence behind the performance. That's you. That's who you've been all along. You just forgot. And maybe today, you're starting to remember. So if this truth speaks to you, if something in your soul whispered, yes, while listening, then don't let it fade. Hold on to it. Live it. And if you haven't yet, subscribe to this channel. Not for more noise, but for more reminders like this. This isn't just content. This is a different way of seeing the world together. Because freedom was never out there. It was always here, waiting for you, on the other side of, I don't know. So before we close, let me ask you something personal. Not to judge, not to fix, but to reflect. What part of you still fights against the unknown? What emotion rises up when life doesn't go according to plan? Is it fear of what you can't control? Is it anger at how things keep shifting? Is it grief for the version of you that felt more certain? Maybe it's subtle. Maybe it shows up as overthinking, overplanning, over-explaining. Or maybe it's that quiet tension in your chest when you realize there's no map, no guarantee, no perfect answer. Whatever it is, name it. Honor it. You don't need to solve it right now, but you can stop hiding it. Drop it in the comments. Just a sentence, a word, a feeling. You're not the only one. And your honesty might become someone else's mirror. That's why this space exists, not for performance, but for presence. Not for empty positivity, but for real growth. Honest, messy, transformative. And if you've made it this far, that says something about you. You're not looking for shortcuts. You're not chasing fake clarity. You're choosing something deeper. So don't stop now. If today's message stirred something in you, if it opened even a small doorway in your thinking or your heart, then let's keep walking together. The next step in this journey isn't about doing more. It's about becoming keener, sharper, more anchored, even when the world shakes. So watch the next video, Inner Stillness and Strategic Detachment. It's where we take this awareness and learn how to live it. Not just in theory, but in practice. I'll meet you there. And until then, stay present, stay honest, and let go just a little more.